Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. We have ourselves an ALDS preview of the New York Yankees and Toronto Blue Jays. And this one's going to it's highly anticipated. It's the first time these two teams have ever met in the postseason, and both teams finished tied at 94 and 68 in the regular season, with the Toronto Blue Jays winning the division via the tiebreaker. They won 8 of the 13 games in the season series, and Toronto really had their number against the Yankees in Toronto specifically, where they had that 4-game sweep, and they also won 2 of 3. Yankees had better success at home, and I think that home field does play a pretty significant role in this best of 5 game series. But Yankees are coming in probably feeling pretty good after winning the American League Wild Card Series against the Red Sox. And for the Blue Jays, they've been off for a little bit. So again, there's pros and cons to both. I'm not going to sit here and say that one is better than the other, because you can really look at it both ways. But this should be a good one. And I think that, look, these two teams don't really like each other that much. It's kind of one of those things where, we talk about Yankees versus Red Sox. And obviously, that's the historic rivalry. And, that is going to be tough to ever be topped. But I think when you really, between the lines, you could just say there's been animosity between these two teams in this John Schneider, Aaron Boone era. And I feel like there's just a chance for this to be a pretty memorable series. One that I'm not sure on a national scale, like what it does. But look, I think that this is a collision course that I think we've seen coming now for a few months, right? Really, that series, the 4-game sweep, and trying to really turn this whole division around, right? At that time, the Yankees were, starting to struggle a bit. They really weren't playing great baseball around then, but that allowed Toronto to really go from a team that was kind of, fighting for a playoff spot, no guarantees there, to now taking the division lead. And they never really, they held it. The Yankees made it interesting at the end, but they were ultimately able to hold on. So let's, I guess, first go into some of the pitching probables. Now, some are announced, some aren't. I'll have a better idea on the Yankee front and try my best on the Toronto side. But game 1 is a really big game for Toronto to win. It's going to be Kevin Gausman against Luis Gil. And Luis Gil was not on the original, the wild card roster, because he had pitched the last game of the regular season. On that, real quick, as far as the Yankee roster for the division series, I don't expect that many changes. I think one that obviously jumps out that's really easy is Luis Gil for Paul Blackburn. That could be the only one. Now, to speculate on a couple of other possibilities would be maybe like Austin Slater instead of JC Escarra. I don't know that they do that. In fact, I tend to think they'll probably stick with Escarra, but that's one to look for on the hitter side. And on the pitcher side, yeah, like I said, I think it's just going to be Gil for Blackburn. Could Ryan Yarbrough get a look, former Blue Jay, just to add a second lefty to the pen? Maybe, but who would that be for? I don't know, right? Like if you do that, then you're taking off. I'm not even sure, because I think Will Warren stays. I think someone like Mark Leiter Jr. stays, who also spent a very brief amount of time with the Toronto Blue Jays back in 2018. But it's a big start for Luis Gil, who did well in his one start against Toronto this year at Yankee Stadium. It's a small sample size, but Gil did do better at home than on the road. Going to be a hostile environment. And for Gil, you don't anticipate him going deep into the game. You're just kind of hoping that he can do what he does, which is getting out of jams, right? That has kind of been his thing this year, where he's kept the Yankees in games, hasn't necessarily gone too deep, but we'll see. And he'll, I can think about a couple of more starts he had last year against the Blue Jays, different situation completely. But Kevin Gausman really emerged as the ace of this Blue Jay staff this year. Look, for Kevin Gausman, there was tough times the last couple of seasons where it kind of felt like, the Kevin Gausman, I believe it was 2023, thereabouts. Like Gausman had some really, really great years where he was just top notch. And I want to get this right. It was, yeah, he was really good as a Blue Jay, was very good in 22 and then more so 23 and really 24 not nearly as good. And I feel like he picked it back up a little bit this year. The strikeout numbers aren't quite what they were, but the whip is as good as it's been. The opposing batting average. This is a really good year for Gosman. Did struggle in his last start against the Rays for what it's worth, but it's been a bit of a mixed bag as far as guys versus Yankees. I think this year, Yankees saw him a lot. I think this year was more good than bad for Gosman, but I can also picture sometimes where the Yankees really got to him, maybe more so last year. Um, so again, in a somewhat similar way to the Yankees Red Sox uh, series, where I felt like it was really important for the Red Sox to win game one with Crochet. They did. Ultimately, they did win the series. I think here for Toronto, a little more pressure on them. It's the Blue Jays number one. Now he's not Crochet level, obviously. The Blue Jays have a little more of a balance in their rotation. But for Luis Heel, he's clearly, especially after what Cam Schlittler did in the Red Series, Heel is clearly number four, right? He is, in all likelihood, their I don't know, weakest feels like the wrong word to use, but he certainly he's not gonna get you a whole lot of distance. And so you're probably going to see that Yankee bullpen a little bit early and not the good part of the bullpen either. So that's a really, really big game for Toronto. Now, if the Blue Jays win game one, then all of a sudden the pressure shifts to the Yankees in game two, where they will have Max Fried in the mound, which you got to feel good about. Now, Fried, and look, the defense kind of failed him a bit, but Fried in Toronto um, wasn't great. Like, not at that point, Fried was amazing. And that was kind of not necessarily the beginning of Fried struggling, but like he wasn't his amazing self. Not horrible, and there was a lot to blame around him. I believe it was um yeah, it was right around July 1st. I think. I think it might have actually been July 1st, and the Blue Jays were wearing their red uniforms. I think Fried had pitched that game. And again, like I mean, look, there's four different series, and I think Fried was another one who faced the Blue Jays at least twice, if not three times. Fried had a pretty solid outing at Yankee Stadium. The last game these two teams played, Fried got into some trouble early, got out of it. But the point there is that as a Yankee fan, you like Fried. A game two for Fried is good, whether they're up 1-0 or down 1-0. It's kind of a good place to be where he can kind of be the stopper or the saver, if you will, if they're down 1-0, or hey, like, because, as amazing as Cam Schlittler was, Max Fried has been the one that you depend upon most in this season. And for the Blue Jays, they haven't announced the game two starter. Just going to take a guess that it might be like a Shane Bieber, possibly. And then, you go to Yankee Stadium, and then it's probably game three. Carlos Rodon again hasn't been announced. And then maybe Trey Savage for the Blue Jays, who there's a lot of upside there, obviously. Young and experienced, and, we'll be in a tough environment. But hey, like, we've seen these young kids perform in a big, big way. I mean, just look at Schlittler. Obviously, he had the home crowd behind him, a little bit different. And who knows? Maybe a Savage goes game two, right? They haven't announced that yet. That could be the answer. But that's game three. Then game four, likely Cam Schlittler for the Yanks, if there is a game four, of course. And then for the Blue Jays, seemingly would be Chris Bassett or maybe somehow Kevin Gosman on 3 days rest. It's possible. We'll see. But, and Max Scherzer, I'm not sure what role he'll play. I don't really anticipate him being part of the starting mix. It seemed like he kind of, ended up being lesser on the totem pole. Obviously, Jose Barrios goes on the IL, but I think Scherzer, there was some struggles there, and would expect it if he is in the roster, which he probably will be, more out of the bullpen. But this Blue Jay lineup really is difficult. And all indications, and we don't know this for sure, that Bo Bichette, as I'm recording this, that Bo Bichette will not be on the LDS roster. Now, who knows? Like, maybe he is placed on the roster with the idea that maybe he'll make it back by the end, right? Like, we don't know if he isn't on the roster or if he is limited. That's a big loss for Toronto. I mean, Bo Bichette is one of their best players. He's been a thorn on the Yankees side for years. They do take a hit there, but beyond that, they really do have a lineup that's extremely tough to strike out. They're going to put the ball in play, and they're going to force the Yankees to play good defense. Now, luckily in the Red Sox series, they played well, but on that turf in Toronto, I want to see what happens. I think it's a tough environment for the Yankees. Not so much from like a mental side, but just the literal, just the way that the game is played there, the speed of it. I don't know. I'm curious to see how they do, right? And for Toronto, obviously Vlad Guerrero Jr. is, from a Yankee standpoint, the one that you can't let beat you. You know, he and look like obviously we'll see because they have other. I mean, it's a deep lineup, but that is a player that if the intentional walk or the base is open, don't hesitate to pitch around him. And it might be what we see with Aaron Judge with John Schneider. I'm very curious because Schneider has always, more than most teams, the Blue Jays, maybe the Angels a little bit too, um, would really not pitch to Judge. And, in some cases it makes sense, in some it doesn't. It really depends on the situation. Um, but yeah, like Alejandro, just in terms of seniority, obviously Alejandro Kirk has been on this Blue Jay team for a while and is a really good hitter. Um, you know, at the top, George Springer, who the Yankees know very well from his days in Houston, like he is having an amazing season. He's an emotional leader. It would be pretty cool from a Yankee perspective to knock out Alex Bregman and then to knock out George Springer. I mean, that would be sort of on that sort of, you're not playing the Astros specifically, but you are playing some of the core members of the 2017 team. But Springer is going to be difficult. This is a deeper lineup than the Red Sox one. It's again, these are two different teams, the way they're built. And again, it's not as if the Blue Jays have, it's not the names, and especially especially if there's no Bo Bichette, but they will grind you out. We saw that all of this season. Just the head-to-head matchups, like, and they're gonna get to the bullpen. Like they will, in doing that, um, they will get to some of the lesser members of the bullpen, and that's not what you want, right? And so it's gonna be important for the Yankees to be more pitch efficient, if at all possible. Um, the only former Yankee that I see on this Blue Jay roster is Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who was on the Yankees in 22 and 23. I could see him, working his way into an important situation. I mean, of course, the Yankees have a couple of lefty starters in Fried and Rodon, so I would think that Kiner-Falefa might start those games. But with the Blue Jay rotation again, it's not so much like with the Red Sox with Crochet at the top. It's more the depth, the fact that they can roll out three or four solid starters. Now they're all right-handed. So from a Yankee standpoint, you're going to see more of the traditional lineup, right? You're going to see Ben Rice at first and Ryan McMahon at third and Jazz at second. And so therefore Paul Goldschmidt may play a role off the bench against the likes of a Mason Fluharty or a who is it? Or a Brendan Little. So that's something to think about. Again, he's gonna have more of a bench role. And of course, coming for defensive purposes late in games if the Yankees are winning. So again, you're gonna see a little bit less of the Ahmed Rosarios um, and the Jose Caballeros in this series. Yeah, that's always the interesting thing, right? Different teams present different, challenges. And so I do like the Yankee lineup in that sense a little bit more. It's the one that we've been more used to, and it's the one that we're going to see here. Where the Red Sox were a lot more lefty heavy in the sense of Crochet and Chapman, as well as a lot of other relievers in that pen. Blue Jays don't have a great bullpen, and the Yankees one is shaky as well. It is, but the Blue Jays, that's kind of where you can exploit them. Where if this can be a close game late, and I almost think that both teams feel this way. Both teams, from a pitching standpoint, the starting rotations are the strength, and the bullpens are not. And like Jeff Hoffman is the Blue Jays closer, um, and even just beyond that, it's a little bit dicey out there. I mean, they acquired Sir Anthony Dominguez, and there's some other. Obviously they also acquired Louis Varland from the Twins. They tried to improve it a bit, but I think, Eric Lauer may play a pretty big role as a lefty out of the pen as well. He was part of their rotation this season. But yeah, like again, I'm looking more as far as the lineup, like the Ernie Clements of the world. Like they have just gotten things done. Addison Barger was really good in those series in Toronto. The Yankees remember Andres Jimenez more from his time with the Guardians and some of those playoff series. Nathan Lucas is, really come up clutch with the Blue Jays. So how I see this series just from a prediction standpoint, and I will say, and I predicted Yankees in three, and that's what it was. For this one, Like, in some ways, I think it's a little more challenging, not by that much, because the best of 3 is tough with Crochet. It makes it really difficult. This is a best of 5, and Toronto is really good at home, and I think that home field advantage, again, plays a big role here. Here is the blueprint for the Yankees, and it's a pretty simple one. It's splitting the first 2 games in Toronto, and I think the more likely thing is losing game 1, winning game 2 is probably the more likely way it goes. The Yankees really finding a way to win games 3 and 4 at home. And so the Yankees would win. And so Yankees winning in 5. That will be my prediction. However, I'll add this. If it goes 5, not to say the Yankees can't win, right? And in all likelihood, that's Max Fried. Like, in all likelihood, you have a pretty decent matchup there, right? That's probably Fried and the game 2 Toronto starter. Although I take that back, it could actually be Fried Gosman. Take that back. But if it goes to game 5, I think Toronto has the advantage in that situation. So my and part of it is what I'm hoping for, but I try to keep it completely objective. I will say Yankees in 4, but I will say if it goes 5, that the Blue Jays win the series. That's where I really believe that the Blue Jays winning the division, getting the number 1 seed, that is where that benefit truly comes to pass. Truly, I mean, it already has in a way. The Yankees were able to kind of survive the first test and getting past the Red Sox. Now it's not over yet. Toronto still has that advantage in a place that's going to be hard to play for the Yankees. The crowd's going to be going nuts. The Toronto Blue Jays have not won a playoff game since 2016. And they have not reached the American League Division Series since 2016. That's a hungry fan base and just a hungry team that has a bit of a chip on their shoulder. So I think it's imperative for the Yankees to find a way to win this in 4. For example, if the Yankees are up 2-1 in this series, that is so the pivotal moment of this series. If that's the point, the Yankees have to view that as an ultra must-win game in game 4 to not let it go back to Toronto. Going to be a really interesting series. Looking forward to it. I really think that this rivalry is going to really take a bunch of notches up. It just feels like it's teetering on that and it's about to explode. And hey, this is the first matchup between these 2 teams in the postseason. So it's been a long time coming. And, look, you can make the argument, and this is kind of an obvious thing to say because we're so close to the World Series, and I respect the Mariners and Tigers for sure. But hey, we're at a point now where the winner of this series could very, very easily be the team representing the American League in the World Series. So a lot on the line here. And yeah, game 1, Luis Gil versus Kevin Gausman. Really important game for the Blue Jays to win, in my opinion. They got more than the slight edge there. I mean, they're definitely the favorite for game 1. We'll see what happens. American League Division Series, New York Yankees, Toronto Blue Jays. It's going to be fun.